the Russian-speaking media. That's the name of it. So there was a presentation at the Riga summit, and after that we don't hear that much. And some people believe that, okay, it's already there, there is this EU intention to counter Russian propaganda or things like that. But can you really explain to those who doesn't understand what's happening?
After European Endowment for Democracy has prepared a big report on how to counter Russian propaganda, how to really enhance ability of Russian language media to be more plural, to open debate, to create alternative to the Kremlin-controlled channels. The mobilization of resources and the mobilization of political will from the key governments in the West has really moved forward, although results are still to be seen. So we have some initiatives that are already shaping, like a news exchange, the production center to support independent production in Russian language, but also other type of support, which basically report was addressing very strongly, saying that we cannot just rely on the regional structures. We have to strengthen also individual media that are already existing. So it has to be a parallel process where we try to find resources and mobilize new resources for the horizontal structure, regional big structures. And at the same time, we have to strengthen each of the member of those structures separately. Partners who are already existing on the market, and they need to be strengthened in order to really make a difference. So this process is now ongoing. And what is the positive part of this process is that in order to generate new funds, you have to go through certain type of procedures within those governments. But those governments met in Warsaw on 10th of September, 35 governments, the readers of the report from the European Endowment for Democracy, and they all agreed that the recommendations will guide their internal discussion to mobilize new funding.
But at the same time, there is another side of the story when there would be journalists and some media experts when you go to some conferences in the different European countries who say like government can't influence, it's like it's not a censorship, but it's like the government, it's not good when government really impose something on media. And there is like some natural concern also among the different people in the European Union, journalists, experts in academia, that how you can do that, why you should really counter the Russian propaganda, and maybe would it be imposing another way of message, but from the other side?
Well, the journalist, when writes, should be independent, but when journalists need support to be active when the market does not provide enough opportunity, and this is the case. In case of Russian language media, we don't have normal market situation where the good journalists can just earn money. So in such a situation, to support independent journalists, we need a public money. We need the money that are governed by the democratic governments. And in that sense, this is not a one government, but this is a collective effort. When it is a collective effort, there is no one single influence. There is a principle that guides it. And the principle is that this is a market where the public money are needed because media, independent media, are too weak, or especially in Russia, under extreme pressure from the government, including financial, administrative, and all other kind of pressures. So in such a context, in order to really support independent journalism, the governments of democratic world needs to support them. And that is justification also for the taxpayers of those societies, because they are asking very same question, why we should pay for some kind of Russian language media far away from our everyday life. Today we are busy with refugees, today we have terrorism, so why we should spend our taxes on those programs? But here we have an answer, because the processes that are taking place in eastern part of the European continent, the fact that Russian propaganda dominates minds of so many people, this potentially can affect security of the whole continent. So the support is meant to be support for the more freedom on the continent, not just to manipulate someone. That's why the money goes to journalists without any strings attached. This is just a money to help them to be independent and to do what they like to do.
And another concern was, which I heard and had been raised, is that the report of the European Endowment for Democracy had been public, that it's really, you can't really find it and read it, so it's just done by the government, so why you don't let the others to read it openly?
The report, actually, name of the report is feasibility study, so it's not report. We are not advocating that propaganda is something bad, that this is something to be read like you read a book. The report was meant to mobilize governments and to tell them what to do. And that was a specific aim of this report. There are many other reports, like publications by Peter Pomerantsev, by many famous authors, Edward Lucas, who is publicly saying what is the nature of the Russian propaganda. And this is the type of the publication that is for audience. Our report is just boring. It says about, you know, business models. It says about how donors should define the priorities in order to make successful go through the parliament and through their financial commissions, and then eventually who would be the recipient of such a support. So this was a report, a feasibility study actually, to say what is possible and what is needed, but specifically addressing this issue to the government, because what we identify as a big gap is not enough support for independent media.
And just being more maybe general, not up to particularly your position at ED, you following this current media development and this kind of relativism and nihilism which is there, that, you know, everybody lies, you know, there is no real objective reality, it's everybody has his own agenda. What do you think for, like, Europeans, for the European intellectuals, after this time already, living with all this kind of disinformation campaign, not just from Russia, we have ISIS, we have all very, very complicated media environment with social media. What is probably the biggest challenges for media and how we can get out of that, for the Western media, from our model of media?
Well, of course, for today's world, the communication and degradation of the debate is a huge problem. So it's not about propaganda, it's not about even ISIS, it's about a nature of media today. That media are becoming more and more simplified, more and more oriented for the quick news, not for the in-depth analysis. And same with the media literacy. Nowadays, when you have 140 you know, letters for the Twitter, you have to say what you want to say in 140 letters. But that is an extremely difficult trap. If Putin says referendum in Crimea, and then in next sentence says referendum in Scotland, the people may think this is the same type of referendum, but it's not. The referendum in Scotland, it took 10 years to prepare. A great discussion, very deep discussion. And the referendum in Crimea was not a referendum. It was nothing. It has nothing to do with referendum. So in such a situation, only in-depth discussion can discover it. But today media do not offer time for such a discussion. But it doesn't mean that reality does not exist. Reality exists and truth exists. So we should very strongly fight for saying the reality and the truth exist. Just you need, dear reader, dear audience, you please need a little bit more time to dig in and listen to the proper media, to the proper analysts, to understand what reality is.
As somebody who's done a lot and been participating in the big change in Poland, in reforming Poland, we currently have the situation when during the last parliament election, you know, the people, that was very interesting, that people had believed that there is more corruption done by the previous government than it actually is, which is something very new. And we do have this growth of populism. So I hear we have Adam Michnik here, the head of Gazeta Wyborcza these days here in Kyiv, and we feel a bit of kind of disappointment of Polish intellectuals about what's happening in Poland, why people do believe, why they are really caught up with this populism in Poland, in whole Eastern Europe as well, and not just there. So what would be your answer, your concerns about that?
In every country needs some kind of revolution, because the young people, they are coming to the market, and the recent victory by a Law and Justice Party was based on the shift of the votes of the young people mainly. Because the hard electorate of the both rivaling parties remain more or less the same, with a slight differences, but more or less the same. but there are shifting votes. And those votes, especially from young people. And the young people, they felt they have not received enough energizing message from the ruling party that was ruling Polish government for the last 8 years. And the Law and Justice came with the message promising some kind of revolutionary moves. There is element of populism in this as well, but at the same time there is a mobilization of the social energy, and that became attractive. This also anti-systemic approach. And here people are looking, especially young people, they are looking for black and white solution. In life, we know there is no black and white solution. There is always a very difficult compromise that needs to be reached in order to move things forward. But for the election, for the campaigning, this emotional approach that we are proposing something new, that we are proposing a change, that we are mobilizing social energy, was enough attractive to have a shift of those votes, 5, 7, 10%, which created enough big difference in a Polish electoral system to guarantee half of the seats in the parliament.
The reforms are taking too long. They can really fail, that you really need some kind of, they should be done fast and they should be feasible. So would you go on with that? Now, we also in Ukraine in this, everyday discussion that it's too slow, it's not enough, but what are the urgent things to do?
Well, there are several things. If we look into the speed of Polish reforms from 89, let's say, to 95, the first 6 years, I would say that in some sense the Ukrainian reforms are faster than the Polish one. So we should not be so critical of Ukraine in this respect. What is important that in these 6 years we had almost united front of the Polish political class about what are the key priorities. And here we have a difference. You have division inside your country about even a core priorities, like, for example, relations with NATO, or even relations with the European Union. There is still a big a part of the political class, the former Yanukovych supporters, who are saying they don't want closer cooperation with Europe, or they are trying to generate some kind of doubts. In Poland, this part was not present, but the speed of reforms, in a sense, was slower. The difference, the biggest difference in favor of Poland, I should mention, and I think this is one of my key messages that I'm trying to send now to the people in Ukraine, is that the mind change was faster in Poland. So within 2 years from the change in Poland, this homo sovieticus, this acceptance to corruption as a part of life, was really gone. People were saying enough is enough. We don't want it, in every sense and every dimension. So if you go today to the students at the university and you ask them questions, have you yesterday asked your mother and your father, did you take or give a bribe for small things, for a doctor, for something else? Do they have this talk in home, in house, during the dinner? I am not sure whether it's already happening in a mass sense. So this is the moment where we are eradicating homo sovieticus from our minds. And this part of the Ukrainian revolution is taking too slow.